interview was with CNN. This was a high-stakes moment in her short campaign. After weeks of Republican criticism for avoiding media scrutiny, Kamala Harris opened herself up to questions on CNN. We get you the details shortly. Chinese leader Xi Jinping met with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Beijing as the two countries press ahead on stabilizing communication in their increasingly contentious relationship. Israel has agreed to several pauses in the fighting in Gaza this September to facilitate a polio vaccination campaign for young children. Both United Nations and Israeli officials confirm that these breaks in the war are intended to ensure the safe delivery of vaccines to protect children in the region. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval arrived in Colombo to follow up on the ongoing Colombo Security Conclave initiative. He's also scheduled to meet with political leaders in Colombo. Workers at a South Korean province will be trying to work less next year, while employees at more than 50 organizations across the Gyeonggi province will be able to choose either a 4-day week every fortnight or shortened hours every week. Well, a big focus in a first sit-down interview since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris offered her most expansive explanation to date on why she's changed some of her positions on fracking and immigration since her first run for president. But the U.S. Vice President, who was interviewed alongside her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, told CNN she would name a Republican to serve in a cabinet if elected, saying it would be to the benefit of the American public. She also brushed off Donald Trump's questioning of her racial identity and described for the first time President Joe Biden's telephone call informing her he was planning to abandon his bid for a second term after his disastrous debate performance. She stopped short, though, of saying she would alter Biden's policy towards arms sales to Israel. Meanwhile, amidst this tight competition between Kamala Harris and former U.S. President Donald Trump, a new survey reveals that the U.S. Vice President has closed the gap in many key swing states just a month after launching her election campaign. For further clarity on the matter, we have with us Benji Haya joining us from Ground Zero. Benji, this interview was being seen as a key test of Kamala Harris's credibility after what many are calling a prolonged honeymoon that has seen a surge ahead of Donald Trump in opinion polls. But Benji, has Kamala Harris provided one of the clearest looks into her positions and her plans for the presidency? What are you picking up on?
Look, I think this performance was solid if unspectacular, and that's ultimately what she needed to do. You know, this wasn't about necessarily propelling her so far forward in terms of the momentum that puts her on track for victory. One interviewer is unlikely to do that, but she wanted to avoid any slip-ups that could spoil her campaign, and I think she has managed to do that in some of the answers that she gave. You know, Kamala Harris is known for asking the questions. A former prosecutor, a former senator, now it was her opportunity to answer them and try to swat away some of the accusations she's been facing from her critics that she's been hiding from the press during the first couple of weeks of this campaign. Some of the main highlights, I think, to come from this. I mean, you named a few before in terms of her stance on Israel, her admission that she'd take a Republican in her cabinet, and indeed swatting away condemnation, racially targeted condemnation from Donald Trump. I think that the main issues that American people will be focusing on are the economy, and she was asked about her plan on day one, and also why all these ideas that she's come up with haven't already been implemented under the Biden administration. She's been vice president after all. Well, to that, she says that first she needed to make sure the country recovered from the pandemic, but the inflation is down and she will continue with those policies. policies. A second issue was immigration. This was key because what people don't necessarily know is that it was years ago an interview took place in which she was pressed on the crisis at the southern border, migrants crossing in their thousands, and she gave an answer which created this perception in the mind of many Americans that she wasn't strong at interviews, and this was a chance for her to put that record straight. She says at the border she would enforce laws, and the reason that they haven't been able to be harsher in terms of their border policy isn't because of Joe Biden, but instead because of Donald Trump and his position on a border bill that didn't pass through Congress. And the third, I think, main takeaway on policy was to do with fracking, mainly a domestic issue in the US, producing of natural gas, but still very important when talking about America's place on the world vis-a-vis energy or climate change. She said at one point she wanted to put an end to fracking once and for all. She has since reversed that position, mainly in a ways to not lose votes in states where fracking is so important to the economy, like Pennsylvania. And I think it's that has allowed the likes of Donald Trump to brand her as a chameleon for what he sees as her shifting policy positions.
Well, but the choice of CNN as the outlet and Bash as the interviewer has also been criticized by Trump supporters. In fact, many MAGA supporters claim that both are sympathetic to Democrats and were unlikely to pose hard questions. But would you disagree, Benji?
Well, I don't think there were any questions which were, overly scrutinous, but that is a very kind of American style of television. Frankly, this interview was split up. It wasn't intense. It was dotted around with light-hearted questions about family, clips of them walking around a diner. That was the theme and the tone of the interview. It was very different to, a court session or something like that. But if you think about American media, American politics, this is a very polarized nation. It was unlikely that Kamala Harris was going to go on a network which was unfavorable towards her. In a similar vein, Donald Trump is often featured on television, but he's on the likes of Fox News, a more conservative network. He has, credit to him, given far more media appearances. He has taken news conferences, press conferences, but the caveat, of course, is that many of those have been littered with falsehoods and baseless attacks on his opponents, which he's continued in the past 24 hours or so. So I'm thinking the Democrats will be pleasantly relieved that CNN did not necessarily go as hard as they might have feared, and she remained unscathed from this experience, even though I'm sure she will cop a huge amount more criticism from Donald Trump in spite of the fact that she's taken this interview.
Well, this was Kamala Harris's first major interview since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, and her delay in facing interviews has contrasted with Trump, as Benji has explained. Trump has staged a rash of recent media appearances. This includes Fox News and Newsmax, two of his favorite outlets, to voice live on-air criticisms of Harris's acceptance speech at the DNC last week. But as always, Benji Haya, thank you so much for joining us with the latest from Ground Zero. Meanwhile, a groundbreaking proposal in California to set new safety standards for powerful artificial intelligence models has passed a major milestone. The State Assembly approved Senate Bill 1047, overcoming strong opposition from tech companies and some California House Democrats. But this bill mandates that the largest AI models undergo safety testing and certification before they are deployed. The goal is actually to safeguard people from potential risks, such as the creation of bioweapons. But the measure has sparked a debate in Silicon Valley. In fact, prominent figures like Elon Musk support the bill, viewing it as a necessary step to manage potential public risks. However, opponents, including OpenAI, argue that the requirements could place excessive burdens on developers, particularly small startups. But the bill now goes back to the state Senate for approval of amendments before heading to Governor Gavin Newsom's desk. But the tech-friendly governor has not publicly weighed in on the bill, but has previously voiced concerns about over-regulating the state's homegrown tech industry and is facing pressure from Silicon Valley to veto it. With that, let's get you a quick update on what's happening as far as the US-China relationship is concerned this week. Well, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is calling for improved relations with the United States. In fact, in a meeting with the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Thursday, Xi emphasized the importance of a stable and positive US-China relationship. According to a statement from Beijing, She highlighted the traditional friendship between the two countries and expressed his desire to advance these ties. In a notable departure from his usual demeanor, Xi Jinping asked Jake Sullivan to extend his regards to Joe Biden and showed a willingness to maintain open communication with him. But the Chinese premier's recent comments suggest Beijing is looking to ease tensions with the United States, and his tone reflects an effort to address ongoing issues such as US restrictions on high-tech exports, tensions over Taiwan, China's support for Russia's war in Ukraine, and what US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has described as Beijing's destabilizing actions in the South China Sea.
Since the Woodside Summit, our two sides have made important progress on key areas of cooperation that you and the President discussed, including counter-narcotics, military-to-military communications, and AI safety and risk. The President sent me here for the first trip by a national security advisor in 8 years to follow up on this agenda and to maintain the high-level strategic communication that is essential for responsibly managing the relationship.
Well, joining us for further clarity, Taiwan Plus reporter Adil Brad. Thank you so much, Adil, for making time for us on the World 24/7. Unusually now, Beijing has adopted a conciliatory tone in its reporting on this week's visit by Jake Sullivan, emphasizing cooperation while also claiming that Washington remains incorrect on its China policies. But Adil, take us through the key takeaways and also the significance of the timing of this trip.
This is a very significant visit by Jake Sullivan. This comes after 8 years. We've had a national security advisor who's gone to China to restart some of the channels of communications which were shut down after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. And this visit will allow US to draw guardrails in the relationship, as there are certain powder kegs in this region which can lead towards conflict. And both the sides are interested in making sure that the relationship does not turn into wider conflict in South China Sea and Taiwan. And that is why they are talking. And this visit will allow the next administration to also draw some of the basic frameworks which can make sure that US and China don't end up in a situation where they see themselves in a conflict. And Jake Sullivan went to Beijing to ensure that this channel of communication between the two sides remains open regardless of who is in charge in Washington, D.C.
Right, but the Biden administration has said and consistently aimed that they want a relationship with China that's characterized by competition rather than conflict. But with the US election coming up in November, Democrats and Republicans are also increasingly highlighting concerns about China's impact as far as national security is concerned, also as far as economic growth is concerned. Adil, does this bode well for the US-China relationship in the long and short run?
I think it's good that they are talking about these sensitive issues which require higher level of officials to visit each other. So we had a visit by Wang Yi last year in October when he also met Joe Biden. And this time we've seen that Sullivan met Xi Jinping. This hints that, there are certain areas where both sides see that they can have a conversation without turning into a wider conflict. And as US describes this current status of the relationship as competition, China does not view in the similar fashion. China has its own red lines, whether it comes to Taiwan or South China Sea. But we can see that there are certain basic topics that both sides are willing to talk about, and that can make sure that, issues like South China Sea, which is the areas within the BRP Sierra Madre ship that's, in the South China Sea controlled by Philippines, that flashpoint does not become into a wider conflict. And China is also testing the grounds by sending its Coast Guard vessels to the South China Sea and pushing the Philippines-US relationship. So from the Chinese side, we have not seen any scale down of the tensions, but the US wants to make sure that this channel of communication remains open so that there is no miscalculation.
Right, Adil Brar, really appreciate you making time for us and joining us on the World 24/7.
Thank you.
With that, let's turn our attention to a quick update as far as the Israel war in Gaza is concerned. Israel agreed to temporarily halt its military offensive in Gaza starting this Sunday to allow healthcare workers to vaccinate around 640,000 children against polio. The country, which has been under international pressure to address the disease's outbreak in Gaza, emphasized that the staggered pauses over 3 days were not a step toward a ceasefire and that fighting would resume after vaccines were administered. A top White House official hinted at limited progress in ongoing ceasefire negotiations, saying that nothing is done until it is done. Talks will be further complicated by ongoing Israeli raids in the occupied West Bank that have killed 17 people, including a Palestinian militant commander. But listen in to what a World Health Organization representative in the Palestinian territories had to say.
Two-round polio vaccination campaign will actually start on the 1st of September in the Gaza Strip. During each round of the campaign, the Palestinian Ministry of Health, in collaboration with WHO, UNICEF, UNRWA, and partners, will provide 2 drops of the novel oral polio vaccine type 2, so-called NOPV2, to more than 640,000 children under 10 years of age.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military said it had killed 5 Palestinian fighters inside a mosque in the West Bank city of Tulkarm in the midst of one of the largest assaults on the occupied territory for months. The overall toll, of 16 Palestinians killed in less than 2 days would make it the deadliest Israeli operation in the West Bank since the 7th of October Hamas attacks in Israel, which killed 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and ignited the Gaza war. Mohammed Ghazali has been tracking the finer details for us. He joins us live at the moment. Ghazali, what details can you disclose as we speak?
In the last 2 days, we have seen that Israel has carried out its attack in West Bank, and it claims to have killed many militants, or say the terrorists, as Israel claims it to be, who were hiding in a mosque. And this has been Israel's operation in West Bank has been going on, while the experts particularly claim that since the Gaza operation, or say the attack on Gaza, will come to a halt in the next 3 days as the polio vaccination, as we were reporting right now. The polio vaccination program starts from Sunday, and United Nations and WHO plans to vaccinate more than 6 lakh children there. So Israel has started it simultaneously. It's the operation in West Bank, and it has killed around 17 people. Most of them claim to be members of militant organizations in the West Bank. But the rights organization, human rights organization, or the local media based in the West Bank claim that these were civilians, but they were not in combatant operation or anything like that. But the larger implication of this attack is that whenever there is a talk of ceasefire, whenever Israel, Palestine, or some of the mediators from US, Qatar, or even Egypt claim to reach an agreement, claim to reach a point where a ceasefire could be obtained for this entire Israel-Gaza war, Israel launches one attack or the another, which the experts claim is to derail the ceasefire talks, as being the Israeli prime minister is being accused by his own cabinet ministers, opposition leaders. Yes. So we'll have to see that whether this operation will also lead to an explosive situation in West Bank, because West Bank is not under Hamas control. It's controlled by Palestinian Authority, right. And the president of whom is Mr. Mahmoud Abbas. So we'll have to see whether West Bank will also explode into that kind of situation, because Israel cannot also afford to have explosive situation all across its border. Absolutely. We have seen what happened with Lebanon, and then a war is happening in Gaza. Talks with Egypt are also not happening. The ceasefire talks are also not progressing further, because Israel claims, or Israel is adamant on guarding the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Israel and Egypt, or Gaza and Egypt, which is earlier with Israel wants the control there as well. So in and around Israel, the situation is very volatile, and these military operations also will lead to escalation in the situation there.
Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on the volatile situation. As always, thank you so much, Ghazali, for joining us with the latest. In other news, CIA Deputy Director David Cohen has revealed that the suspects in the foiled plot to attack a Taylor Swift concert in Vienna wanted to kill a huge number of people at the event. He explained that US intelligence agencies provided information to the Austrian authorities, which allowed them to disrupt the plot and save hundreds of lives. Listen in.
With explosives, they were found
with bomb-making material. They had access to the venue. And they were plotting, I think the concert was the next day, before the day after they were arrested. They were plotting to kill a huge number, tens of thousands of people at this concert, including, I'm sure, many Americans, and were quite advanced in this. The Austrians were able to make those arrests because the agency and our partners in the intelligence community provided them information about what this ISIS-connected group was planning to do.
As always, news and updates continue in a moment, right after this very short break.
Stay informed and entertained with the new and updated NDTV News app. You can watch all our channels live, listen to podcasts, read breaking and exclusive news from around the world and more. Download the NDTV app today and get access to the best journalism and storytelling on your smartphone or tablet. The NDTV app. News that matters to you.
Hi, I'm Shreya Saran. Kerala's Wayanad area is hit by devastating landslides, resulting in loss of lives and livelihood. Kerala needs your help right now. Let's join NDTV initiative. Come, donate. Let's rebuild Wayanad.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual. One day this lecture hall will be made of code, and driverless cars would be trapped in intersections. But even in this maze of the future, you can't wish away health. It's time to become more resilient. "10 years of Banega Swasth India, we have grown and achieved so many milestones. And now I have a plan to beat the urgency, to stop breathing with difficulty, to relieve getting choked with inactivity. Energize our government, our environment, our society, and ourselves. Everyone, everywhere, every day. Banega Swasth India. One world hygiene.
Landslide devastation in Kerala's Wayanad. Join NDTV's initiative. Donate for Kerala.
Stay informed and entertained with the new and updated NDTV News app. You can watch all our channels live, listen to podcasts, read breaking and exclusive news from around the world and more. Download the NDTV app today and get access to the best journalism and storytelling on your smartphone or tablet. The NDTV app. News that matters to you.
This week on India Ascends.
Pole-bound Sri Lanka and volatile Bangladesh witnessing India versus China power play. Will the trouble in
Welcome back. India's National Security Advisor G. Doval arrived in Colombo to attend the Colombo Security Conclave that's going to be held today. Officials said the Indian National Security Advisor is due to make a call on President Ranil Wickremesinghe as well. But this conclave, with its Colombo Secretariat, brings together national security advisors and deputy NSAs from India, Sri Lanka, the Maldives and Mauritius. Meanwhile, in news from the neighborhood, the Bangladeshi government is seeking a $8 billion loan in monetary aid basically from global lenders. This as they have to repay foreign debt because Bangladesh owes over $1 billion to power companies. Here are the finer details for you.
As the crisis continues in Bangladesh, the interim government has now sought funds from development partners, including the International Monetary Fund, to pay back foreign liabilities and boost foreign exchange reserves. This comes days after the head of interim government, Mohammad Yunus, spoke about bringing institutional reforms. Even though the hangover of coup against Sheikh Hasina still remains, the country is facing a double whammy with political and economic crisis. Food inflation has crossed 14% in July, the highest in the past 13 years. And the recent floods have multiplied the government's challenges. The government has already sent a letter to the Asian Development Bank seeking $300 million for flood rehabilitation and $5 billion from other development partners like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, Japan International Cooperation Agency and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. IMF's staff mission is also likely to visit Bangladesh in September to discuss the proposed loan. Bangladesh is also struggling with a fragile banking sector hit by scams and defaults linked with the Hasina dispensation. The economic crisis in Bangladesh is also being seen by experts as a contest between two regional powers, India and China. Experts in Bangladesh feel this can also help Bangladesh deepen its ties with the countries which will provide monetary aid. As far as China is concerned, it has been the largest trading partner of Bangladesh for 13 consecutive years, and Bangladesh's dependence on China increased under Sheikh Hasina's 15-year rule.
We have an $8 billion line of credit with India and a $20 billion line of credit with China. If any of these countries wants to turn it into budget support at a concessional term, then Bangladesh should take it if and only if it is a concessional term. What Bangladesh, as far as I know currently, the governor, the Bank of Bangladesh Bank is not seeking bilateral support. They're asking for additional support probably from the IMF and also from World Bank and ADB.
It's also a tricky situation for India because the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is still staying in India while anti-India sentiments are high on the streets of Dhaka.
Cordial relationship with countries in the neighborhood is very important, and anti-India sentiments is from this side of the world, when you're looking at it from the Indian perspective, is not something that you will want to happen. But if we specifically talk about the impacts, I would say them as short-term political things, and these are too dissipate. We have seen this before as well. We have seen this in Maldives. Despite anti-India tourism in Maldives, the Indian tourist flows to Maldives this year was one of the highest. Despite say India-China competition, the India-China bilateral trade is reaching its high every year.
Bangladesh's interim government under Mohammad Yunus is trying to get back to normalcy, and fixing the economy should be its top priority. In Delhi, Mohammad Ghazali for NDTV.
Well, thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest updates for you. Do stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Shreya Saran. Kerala's Wayanad area is hit by devastating landslides, resulting in loss of lives and livelihood. Kerala needs your help right now. Let's join NDTV initiative. Come, donate. Let's rebuild Wayanad.
Some people say the metaverse will only be virtual. One day this lecture hall will be made of code, and driverless cars would be trapped in intersections. But even in this maze of the future, you can't wish away health. It's time to become more resilient. "10 years of Banega Swasth India, we have grown and achieved so many milestones. And now I have a plan to beat the urgency, to stop breathing with difficulty, to relieve getting choked with inactivity. Energize our government, our environment, our society, and ourselves. Everyone, everywhere, every day.